Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. A major bridge collapse in Baltimore. NBC's Tom Costello on the scene.
Just a phenomenal incident, terrible incident this morning.
Is America sliding toward Chinese-style capitalism, where politics and national security concerns matter more than profits? Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal on the slow creep of politics into boardrooms.
The real burden really here is on the folks running the companies to stay focused on making great products rather than trying to please whoever's in the White House at that particular moment.
And the head of the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, raising the alarm on the retirement crisis.
We basically told people to do it themselves. That's the equivalent of dropping a bunch of pieces from an engine and saying, assemble it yourself. Good luck.
Plus, the rest of today's stories that got us squawking, from cocoa to Krispy Kreme to Florida. It's Tuesday, March 26th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen. Andrew is off today. And cocoa prices yesterday at an all-time high. Trying to figure out why. Maybe the chocolate bunnies for Easter?
It is Easter. A lot of things are, a lot of foodstuffs, food input, a lot of things
Not like this, up 241% over the last year.
Well, we have Easter every year.
Yeah, those are some big increases that we've seen in cocoa prices.
Breaking news overnight in Baltimore, the Francis Scott Key Bridge partially collapsed, but it's a big partial if you see the videos. After it was struck by a large container ship, authorities say 2 people so far have been removed from the water. 1 is in very serious condition. They're still looking for upwards of 7 people. They also say there's an active fuel spill from the vessel. Shipping giant Maersk said that it had chartered the container ship, which was carrying its customers' cargo. It was being operated by charter company Synergy Group. And NBC's Tom Costello joins us now with the latest. Tom, good morning.
Hey, Joe, this is a major disaster here in the Baltimore area. This is the Francis Scott Key Bridge. This is the road that goes up to the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And you can see the bridge goes up, if you will, at an angle. That's it. That's the end of the bridge. Look to the right. You'll see cargo is stacked on top of a container ship, and that's the ship that hit the bridge. Just a phenomenal incident, terrible incident this morning, 1:30, in which a Singapore-flagged cargo vessel hit the structure, hit this bridge, and immediately took it all out. The pylon or the support structure collapsed, and when it did, the entire bridge then went down. The fire department in the last few minutes has said that they believe 7 people were on board or on top of that bridge, I should say, and went into the water. 2 people were recovered. 1 of them is in critical condition at a local trauma center. Everybody on board the ship is okay, including both pilots and the crew. The teams here on the ground, the fire department and the Coast Guard, have not yet gotten onto that ship because they want to do a full damage assessment, essentially to see how seaworthy it is. They do stress that they do not believe that there is anybody from the ship in the water, and they do not believe that there's any pollution in the water. Nonetheless, this vessel clearly has in some way either lost its ability to navigate or made a significant navigational error, hitting the pylon here for the Francis Scott Key Bridge, this critical bridge in one of the nation's busiest ports. And so if you travel up and down I-95, of course, in and around Baltimore, be aware I-95 is open, but you're likely to see significant traffic today. The port itself likely to be dealing with huge logistical challenges just in terms of the ship traffic and cargo traffic and what it can and cannot do. And as 695 is closed in and around Baltimore, 895 is open, 695 is closed. So this is going to be just a tremendous logistical mess today. But at the moment, this is an immediate search and rescue operation with the fire department from multiple jurisdictions, fire departments, plural, as well as the Coast Guard. But Joe, I'll tell you, we checked with on the survivability of being in the water. It's about 45 degrees in the water, 32 degrees outside where we are right now. And the University of Minnesota Duluth is suggesting you'd have about 7 minutes in the water before you start to be facing exhaustion. Maybe you would have an hour in the water if you're lucky and you have a flotation device and some sort of warm weather or cold water gear, I should say. Sorry, it's awfully cold out here. Not long, maybe an hour of survivability in that kind of water temperature. Nonetheless, the all-out effort continues here with helicopters circling overhead and searching the water for any signs of survivors. Joe?
Tom, what about cars? The 7 that you're talking about, does that include vehicles? Were there any vehicles? Do we know?
Yeah. The fire department says that they believe that there are cars in the water. They already have sonar imagery suggesting that there are cars in the water. It's not clear how many people were in cars that went in the water. It's not clear whether there were construction workers on the bridge at the time who went in the water. In total right now, they believe 7 people are missing.
Tom, on another video, I don't know if you've seen it, and it's early, and it's, I'm not going to say we have no idea, but it looks like the lights went out in the cargo ship. It looks like the power went off, and it looked like it lost ability to navigate. I don't know whether you've seen that, because this, Yeah,
I saw that, and also it looked like there was smoke coming up off the top of the ship. But we're all getting it's all from a very long distance, of course, and not the greatest cameras that we're getting that vantage point. So we will have a lot of questions for the NTSB as well as for the local, responding jurisdictions, Coast Guard and fire departments. But at the moment, they are right now at this very moment. This is an all-out search and rescue effort, and then later they will try to dissect exactly what went wrong. But the Francis Scott Key Bridge, I think it's about a 55-year-old bridge. This is just a major artery here in the Baltimore area. And so it's just stunning, Joe. I will tell you, the locals are stunned that you would have, first of all, a single ship would hit that kind of a support structure, and second of all, that the bridge would be so vulnerable to being taken out by a single ship, and that it just crumbled like that into the water.
Hey, Tom, it's Becky. Just more on that being such an important artery. I was reading about this, and I don't know if you know this or not off the top of your head, just that trucks carrying hazardous material are not allowed to go through the tunnels that operate as a go-around. So I-95 truck traffic is going to be in huge snarls as a result of this.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Becky. I came up from Washington, D.C., where I live, and I went through 895 to get here. 695 is closed. And you're right. I drove up at 3:30 in the morning. It was a lot faster. At the moment, we're going into rush hour. It's going to be just a mess up and down the East Coast, especially in and around Baltimore. And because that bridge so completely and fully collapsed, it's not going to be a quick fix to get a fix on the bridge at this point.
Could be years, Tom, I think, couldn't it? Or at least months and months.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Listen, I'm no bridge expert. The other question here is going to be who was actually piloting that ship at the time. Because, when you bring a major ship into any of America's biggest ports, the captain of the ship has to stand aside while a local pilot boards the ship to navigate into the port. So the question's going to be, well, who was piloting that ship at 1:30 in the morning? As I mentioned, this is a Singapore-flagged vessel. Who was piloting that vessel at 1:30 in the morning? Did the ship suddenly lose all power, and as a result, the ship became uncontrollable and they crashed into the pylon? We simply don't know the answers to that, and the answers are coming incrementally and slowly from the fire department. As you would expect, their focus right now is very much on search and rescue.
Tom, thank you. Florida has passed a new law that bans people under the age of 14 years of having social media accounts, regardless of parental consent. That new law requires social media companies to close accounts believed to be used by minors under the age of 14. Minors who are 14 or 15 may obtain an account with parental consent. This law is set to take effect January 1st.
I just don't see how you enforce that.
If there are... look, it's never going to be 100%, but if there are implications, I don't know what the repercussions would be for the social media companies if they're caught having minors on that.
Can't you just click yes, I'm over 14, even if you're not?
unless if there are repercussions and the state is able to come up with repercussions for that, you would find the social media companies taking more action, maybe requiring some proof of identification at some point. I think it would be pretty tough, and because it's just a state, I could see the social media companies, going around and trying to go to the federal level. But maybe this would be something that would actually inspire some federal laws to get their arms around the problem that is social media.
Are all kids 10 to 12 on social media?
My son's not.
I think there's a lot, though.
There are a lot, and it's a way to feel like a social pariah. It's hard as a parent to keep it, but yeah, my son's not.
Tesla staff must now install and demonstrate the company's driver assistance technology before handing cars over to buyers in North America. CEO Elon Musk described this as a hard requirement that would slow deliveries. He instructed employees to perform a short test ride with customers to show the system that Tesla describes as full self-driving. Tesla sells that feature as a $12,000 add-on. I can't imagine that you don't need to know a few things about it. These cars are amazing. Now, those cars, any new car, and I never do everything. I never do everything.
I was this morning.
I have no idea.
Something.
Yeah.
You know what I was trying to figure out this morning? How to shut off the information that's being fed back about your driving habits. I figured it out this morning.
Is that really happening?
Yeah.
They haven't yelled at me or anything.
Well, I never knew that it was doing it. This morning, for some reason, it came up when it turned on, and it's a very quick message that comes on when you're trying to back out of the driveway, but I looked at it, and it said the information is being transmitted from this car. And last week, we talked about the story in the Wall Street Journal that laid out how they are tracking that information and selling it to insurance companies. So, yeah, I did spend this morning trying to figure out how to shut it off. If you go to main menu, info, and then you go to the transmitting information section, you have to turn that off.
I'm still working on, the center vents blowing air, the bottom, the top, and which ones I want on, and I'm still working. But normally, when you buy a car, they will spend at least a half hour with you to show you
I'm always in a hurry.
Programming the radio.
Buying a car takes too long.
Yeah, I'm in a hurry too. But then for the next, I lease it, and for the next few years, I have no idea how anything works.
Right.
Apple CarPlay. McDonald's is planning to sell Krispy Kreme donuts at its restaurants nationwide by the end of 2026. That rollout will begin the second half of the year. Krispy Kreme will more than double its distribution to satisfy that partnership, and it's an expansion of a test partnership that started about a year and a half ago. And we'll take a look at the shares quickly. You can see that McDonald's is not doing much, but Krispy Kreme just under 15.
Can we go back to cocoa for a moment? Dave Evans has given me an update.
Yeah.
It's been rising all year because rising temperatures and weather conditions have stressed and damaged crops in West Africa, which produces more than 70% of the global cocoa
supply. It's a supply
supply
thing, not an Easter
Not a
bunny.
demand thing.
Because ever since I was a kid, when you get one of the hollow ones, aren't you disappointed?
Oh, no.
You like the hollow
Those
bunnies?
are my favorites.
They're like half
Super
the
thin.
price.
I know, but to try and bite out of one of those.
Yeah, but that's a real. I used to be so disappointed. It'd come in the form. And you crush it and it breaks. And no, the solid. I like the. For me, I like the solid bunny.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, does Washington's industrial policy pick winners and losers in business? The Wall Street Journal's Greg Ip on the changes to capitalism in the USA.
It looks like how Republicans decide to vote on TikTok might actually have more to do with how Donald Trump feels about Facebook than it does about the national security risk. Same with U.S. Steel. Is it good for Biden's prospects in Pennsylvania? That seems to be the deciding factor.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen. Our next guest compares the current U.S. business climate to China's. He's not doing this as a joke. He's actually taking a look at this. He's got some recent issues that he cites, like a potential ban on TikTok and the controversy over the acquisition of U.S. Steel, as being driven by politics and national security concerns. I would even say not national security concerns as much as national interest. rather than profits. And joining us right now to talk about this is Greg Ip. He's the Wall Street Journal's chief economics commentator and deputy economics editor. You're taking a big picture look. You mentioned a few things that have happened, including the $8.5 billion that we just gave to Intel. You mentioned a few things, but I think, Greg, your bigger point is that companies and boardrooms have to think more and more about politics before they make any decisions.
Right. Well, isn't that the natural consequence of like our embrace of like intervention, right? I mean, whether it's tariffs, whether it's industrial policy, subsidies for electric cars or whatever, or all the national security stuff related to China. Increasingly important business decisions have a political element, which means that if you're in the boardroom of one of these companies, whether it's TikTok or US Steel or Intel or whatever, you've got to evaluate the political environment in everything you do. You might say, well, what else are we going to do? China essentially took the world down this path, and you just can't stand by passively while China exploits our openness. What you worry about is that in trying to meet national interest, politicians increasingly define it as their interest. And that's kind of what bothered me, Becky, about last week, is that it looks like how Republicans decide to vote on TikTok might actually have more to do with how Donald Trump feels about Facebook than it does about the national security risk. Same with US Steel. Is it good for Biden's prospects in Pennsylvania? That seems to be the deciding factor.
How about the abstention yesterday, too, Greg? I mean, how we feel about Israel is how the left flank for President Biden feels about him on re-election. I mean, we throw Israel under the bus just to get a few more votes in November. That's pretty bad.
I mean, it's interesting. Last week, Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, he was doing his a 1-hour press conference. He was asked about, well, you have a lot of operations in Israel and so on. And I thought he dealt with it, reasonably well. He said, like, we have a lot of folks in the West Bank. We're going to keep them there. We're going to take care of them. We have a lot of folks in Israel. They're like very important to our current product set. But those are the kinds of questions and issues CEOs increasingly have to deal with. And you step wrong and you're going to pay the price. Disney's a very good example, right? Got on the wrong side of Ron DeSantis, and DeSantis tried to make it as painful as possible for Disney.
I mean, it's a really interesting shift. It's been happening for years, I guess. What do you think the answer is? Because I think you're right to point out that national interest can be twisted to whatever the person in charge sees as their own interest. I mean, national security is an issue that I think we should be putting before profits. National interest, especially when, that is determined by whoever's in charge, that's a very different issue.
I think it would be helpful to have essentially the guidelines about what's driving our decisions be as transparent as possible. For a while, we had the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States screening foreign investment, and it was a relatively compact group, and it didn't look at everything. But in the last year, we've vastly expanded the remit of that group to sort of look at quite a few more things. And frankly, when you have, ongoing antitrust reviews like subsidy decisions, it just hands the political people more and more sort of like pressure points. I think the burden really, though, is on the companies to do the right thing by their shareholders and their products. You look at a company like Boeing, which used to make great commercial airliners, but increasingly sort of seems to have lost its way. And it's hard not to escape the conclusion that part of that might be related to how they focused on cultivating their biggest customer, the Pentagon, by doing things like moving their head office to Arlington, Virginia. It may be that I think the real burden really here, Becky, is on the folks running the companies to stay focused on making great products rather than trying to please whoever's in the White House at that particular moment.
Greg, you did mention just industrial policy, and some of it is security related. I guess we need to onshore all these important industries. We don't want to be left out in the cold, but some of it's not. Some of it is just, you mentioned EV subsidies. I guess you could connect the dots to national security way down the road, but a lot of it is just the government deciding which way the economy should go, who the winners and who the losers should be. It has nothing to do with national security. We're just drifting that way. The IRA.
Well, yeah, and honestly, the argument for industrial policy is that you have market failures when things like national security come along, but you sometimes get the impression that at least this administration defines market failure so broadly that virtually anything could fit under that definition. Failure to pay good wages, that's a market failure. absence of on-site childcare, market failure. You keep going and going, and suddenly that becomes a reason to pile on all sorts of other parameters when you're dealing with business. You look at the EV stuff, you look at the CHIPS Act on semiconductors, you can see that there are a lot of progressive priorities. You can have a positive or a negative opinion about those priorities, but they definitely get in the way of trying to meet the central goal of those programs, which is to build up indigenous capacity in those areas. And if you're a company thinking of doing business with Uncle Sam on these terms, you have to evaluate, well, how much do we want to get on board with these terms? Is it really ultimately in our customers and shareholders' best interest?
Faustian bargains, yeah.
Greg, that is really, really thoughtful piece on this. We appreciate your time this morning. We were talking about it in the breaks. It just puts a really good point on things. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Coming up next on Squawk Pod, the rest of today's business headlines, including BlackRock CEO Larry Fink sounding the alarm. He says a retirement crisis is brewing.
When you have people who are living easily till 90 years old and beyond, we need to rethink how we do all of this.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Squawk Pod.
Up and Becky, Q.
Welcome back, everybody. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink is out with his annual letter to shareholders. Among the headlines on this, he warns that a global retirement crisis is coming as people live longer and safety nets like Social Security are stressed. Fink says that one of the solutions is to get more people to invest more of their assets in capital markets. He writes in part, no other force can lift more people from poverty or improve quality of life quite like capitalism. And this is one of the more personal letters. In fact, it's the most personal letter I've ever seen from Larry Fink. He starts out the entire letter talking about how when his mom passed away in 2012, he and his brother had to go through his parents' bills and finances because his dad had started declining pretty quickly. He realized that they had saved much more in retirement than he had ever anticipated because his mom was a professor, I think at Caltech. Cal Northridge, was an English professor. His dad owned a shoe store, and he's guessing that between the two of them, they never made more than $150,000 in up-to-date current finances, if you were to look at that in today's dollars. But his dad was a pretty enthusiastic investor and invested heartily in the stock market. He points out, Larry does, that as he's been to different countries looking around, you are looking at population's age. In Japan, for the first time last year, they had 10% of their population exceeded 80 years old. That makes them the oldest country in the world. If you look at places like Japan, they have most of their savings in the bank. If you look at places like India, a lot of people have their savings in gold. Money in the bank and money in gold don't really do a whole lot. If you invest money, he said if you took $1,000, if his dad took $1,000 and invested it, it'd be $20,000 by the time he was ready to retire. And just points out that capital markets really are the way to help people invest, and that we need to do more to educate them on these matters.
My parents, people that grew up in more difficult times, would say they didn't spend money. My father never made more. He was an auditor for an insurance company. Honestly, I think the most he ever made was $35,000 a year. And what they were able, I was an only child, but to save for me, mind-blowing. Right. Mind-blowing, given it was hundreds of thousands of dollars over. But I remember growing up, we would not get a Lincoln or a Cadillac. We'd get a mid-level Oldsmobile. Never get the things that they really wanted because they wanted to
save and provide for you.
Save and provide for you.
I think that's Larry's message.
We've lost that, I think.
Yeah, that is Larry's message, that we need to educate people about what can happen. He said, telling them to, go invest in your retirement or your 401k, as pension plans have pulled back, as retirement offerings of work have pulled back, we basically told people to do it themselves. But he said that's the equivalent of dropping a bunch of pieces from an engine and saying, assemble it yourself. Good luck. That we do so much to, he points to the Ozempic trends and the Wegovy trends from last year about how we're trying to help people live longer, but we're not teaching them how to take care of themselves in that longer time and make sure they can provide for themselves, which is a valid point.
I can remember talking to Larry Fink at least 5 years ago. This was his passion.
Oh, I would say
maybe
10, 15.
Longer.
I would say at least 10 years ago, maybe longer than that. This has been something he has been concerned about for a very long time. I think it takes new prominence, and there's a new urgency to it when you realize what we were just talking about last week, where Social Security is set to run out of funding by 2034. And when you have these demographics that are working against it, he just makes the point that when Social Security started out, and he ties it back to the Ottoman, to the Hungarian, to 150 years ago when these ideas, or 120 years ago when these ideas first came up. It was a great idea to have people retire at 65, but half of the people who would have paid in by that time would have already died before that. So this was a different way of running insurance programs. And the demographics change all of that. When you have people who are living easily till 90 years old and beyond, we need to rethink how we do all of this. And they're very valid points, and it's a better way of long-term thinking and trying to tackle some of these problems. So hopefully this is a message that catches on and that people can really wrap their brains around.
Yeah, you're not going to, having your money in a bank or a money market is probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
And it helps that he's
He says the firm
runs the world's largest asset manager. Yeah.
The firm is trying
so
to
you
do
can feel
this.
good about
Yeah.
your role in life.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the letter from Larry Fink. It's out, and it's worth a read. Some breaking news right now on some major credit card companies and a long-running legal saga. Kate Rooney joins us with more. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Becky. Good morning. So Visa and MasterCard are settling a class action lawsuit that's been going on for decades now, 2 decades now. The companies have agreed to lower the rates they charge merchants, that's known as interchange fees, and are agreeing not to raise those rates for at least 5 years. Interchange, as some context here, is the fee retailers pay when somebody swipes a debit card or a credit card. At stores, it's set by the card companies. They're also saying that they're going to give businesses a bit more flexibility when it comes to the terms, including the ability to steer customers to preferred payment methods, and they'll allow surcharging as well. The plaintiff's attorney saying in a statement that this will bring $30 billion or so of savings on fees to merchants. They also say the settlement is among the largest in U.S. antitrust history. Visa, in its statement, saying that these were, quote, meaningful concessions that address true pain points small businesses have identified, while MasterCard, for its part, says this agreement brings a closure to a long-standing dispute by delivering substantial certainty and value to business owners. The settlement resolves claims going back to 2005, guys, when a group of retailers filed a class action lawsuit claiming, among other things, that Visa and MasterCard's fees and network rules violate U.S. antitrust laws. The defendants in the case include Visa, MasterCard, and a number of other U.S. financial institutions. The settlement is still subject to court approval. Back over to you.
Kate, thank you. Again, as you mentioned, this is a long-running saga. This is still going to be subject to a U.S. court signing off on it. But both those stocks up by about 0.8% this morning. Maybe tells you a little bit about what the market is thinking. But again, this is a knee-jerk reaction, and we need to hear more on it. Kate Rooney, thank you very much, Kate.
And that's the pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. The highlights of that TV show, plus a little extra, are waiting for you right here, right on Squawk Pod, wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember to hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. That's it. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.